The twin sons of Sandridge rose pale and harsh over a land the color of rusted iron. Dust hung in the air like smoke from an old campfire, and every breath tasted of grit. Far from the main space lanes, the little farming town of Dustwell lived. On hopes and wilted crops, outside a wooden house on the very edge of town, a thin girl named Ilna stood alone. The knees of her jeans were torn. Her boots were patched again and again with scraps of worn leather. She clutched the fence post and watched the empty road, the way a sailor might search for a lighthouse in a storm. Inside the house, her ma rested. On a narrow bed, the widow's face was as pale as moon-bleached bone, and a cold sweat beaded on her brow, even in the heat. Strange blue veins glowed softly under her skin, winding from her neck to her wrists like faint neon vines. Every few minutes a week, cough escaped her throat, and her breath rattled as though she carried stones in her lungs. Elna tried to wipe her mother's face with a damp cloth, but the fever refused to break. The cheap town doctor had come once, shrugged and left without hope. Number credits meant no cure, and no cure meant time was running thin. Ilna stepped outside again. The wind blew hot across empty fields where crops should have grown tall. Broken irrigation pipes lay scattered among rows of brittle stalks. Each pipe was stamped with the crest of a distant corporation that had pulled out of Sandridge long ago, leaving the settlers to fend for themselves. Ilna's pa had died trying to fix those pipes, tossed from a faulty repair drone and buried. Beneath shifting dunes, it was 2 harvests ago, long enough for many neighbors to forget his name. Now Ma was sick, and the girl felt the weight of loneliness pressing on her shoulders like a sack of stones. On the horizon, a shimmer rose where heat met sky. Ilna blinked dust out of her eyes, wondering if she saw a ghost. Slowly, the shimmer sharpened into a figure riding a strange machine. It was a hoverbike, but one shaped like an old earth horse, complete with a steel mane that rippled in the wind. Its powerful thrusters kicked up spirals of red dirt as it approached. Astride the hoverbike sat a tall rider in a wide-brimmed hat, a long coat, and battered boots. A long rifle rested across his back, its wooden stock polished smooth by years. Of use the townsfolk noticed first. Doors creaked open. Curious eyes peered from shaded porches. Someone whispered that trouble was coming. Others muttered that maybe trouble had finally found this forgotten place. Still, no one walked forward to greet the stranger. Travelers meant risk, and risk was a luxury few could afford. Yet Ilna's heart fluttered, for in that single rider she saw a glimmer of the hope she had prayed for each night. The hoverbike slowed to a stop beside the dusty road. The engine's low hum faded, and the swirling dirt settled around the metal hooves. The rider swung down with practiced ease, boots thudded on hard earth. The tall figure took off his hat and brushed grit from the brim. Deep lines marked his face, the kind carved by many suns and many miles. His eyes, though gray with age, held a quiet strength. He was a cowboy from Earth, far from the green hills of his ancestors. For a long moment, the cowboy simply rested, one hand on the seat of his mechanical steed. Silence stretched between dusty buildings and wide blue sky. He seemed in no hurry, as if he had all the hours in every galaxy. Then he glanced toward the lone girl by the fence. His gaze settled on her, the way gentle rain settles on cracked soil soft, steady and without judgment. Ilna's Stont's throat tightened. She thought of turning away, of hiding inside where no one could see her fear. But Ma's cough echoed behind her like a small bell ringing in an empty chapel. Gathering courage, the girl stepped forward. Her boots scuffed gritty ground, her heart hammered. She stopped a few paces from the cowboy and looked up. Dust clung to her lashes, yet her eyes shone wide and honest. "Sir," she said, voice barely more than a breath, "my ma's a widow, and she's awfully sick. Can anyone help us?" The cowboy studied her a moment longer. Then he nodded, slow and certain, as though he had expected this plea all along, set his hat back on his head, adjusted the strap of his rifle, and gestured toward the house with a small tilt of his chin. Ilna felt her knees wobble, but relief warmed her chest. Without another word, the cowboy followed her along the uneven path toward the weather-beaten home. Neighbors watched from behind half-shut shutters. One man spit in the dirt and muttered that outsiders never stay. An old woman whispered, "Quick prayer." Somewhere a child called after a stray dog. But no one dared step in the cowboy's way. Inside, shadows lay thick on the walls. The widow's shallow breathing filled the room, accompanied by the slow tick of a battery-powered clock. The cowboy removed his coat and draped it over a chair. He knelt beside the bed, his large hands gentle as he took the widow's wrist. Ilna stood by the doorway, wringing her fingers, afraid to disturb him. The cowboy's gaze traveled from the faint glow of those eerie blue veins to the stale bottle of water on the nightstand. He touched her forehead, then her neck, and frowned. From a weathered saddle-borne pack, he pulled a narrow scanning wand. Faint green light swept over the widow's chest and spine. The device emitted a soft chime and flashed a red warning. The cowboy's frown deepened. "This ain't a fever from dust or drought," he murmured, voice low yet steady. "Something's in her blood." Ilna's pulse raced. "Can you fix it?" The cowboy set the scanner down and reached into another pouch. He produced a small metal case full of med patches and tiny vials. Each vial held liquid as clear as melted ice. He lined them on the nightstand, careful and precise. Then he motioned for Ilna to bring a cup of clean water as she hurried to the kitchen pump. She noticed through the cracked window an odd sparkle in the afternoon light. 2 dark drones hovered near the old barn, their thin bodies glinting silver. They darted away as soon as she saw them, slipping behind a stand of skinny cactus like guilty thieves. A shiver ran along her spine. Why would drones spy on a sick widow's farm? Ilna returned with water, her mind swirling with questions she dared not voice. The cowboy mixed drops from one vial into the cup and lifted the widow's head with careful strength. When the widow sipped, her eyelids fluttered, though she didn't wake. The cowboy then pressed a med patch over the glowing veins on her forearm. The patch lit up, slowly pulsing. He watched the color shift from crimson to soft gold. Minutes passed. The widow's breathing eased a fraction. Color, faint but real, touched her cheeks. Ilna's eyes filled with tears she quickly wiped away. The cowboy rose, flexing stiff knees, and faced the girl. He spoke quiet yet firm. "She's stable for now," he said. "But whatever poisoned her is still working inside. We'll need more than patches to cure her for good." Ilna nodded, swallowing hard. "What do we do?" The cowboy crossed to the window, stared at the distant hills, and then at the lazy trail of dust where the drones had vanished. He tapped the window frame once, thinking. Finally, he turned back, rifle strap sliding against his shoulder. "First," he answered, "we find out who wants her dead." In that instant, Ilna understood that this silent rider had chosen to stand beside them. A whisper of hope stirred like the first drop of rain striking parched earth. Outside, the suns blazed on, but inside, one stubborn light refused to fade. The cowboy replaced his hat, checked the rifle's charge, and moved toward the door. Ilna followed, a step behind, determined not to lose sight of the only person who had listened. Together they stepped onto the rickety porch, where hot wind tugged at their clothes and shadows, lengthened over the wide barren land that was still their home. Somewhere beyond those hills lay danger and answers, but for the first time in many nights Ilna felt her heart lift. The road ahead was hard, yet she was no longer alone. The afternoon sun hung low over Dustwell, painting every wall the color of glowing embers. Inside the widow's small house, the cowboy tightened the straps on his worn leather gloves. Ilna watched him with wide eyes while her ma slept under a light blanket, her breathing steady but weak. The cowboy bent close to the widow's arm, where the med patch still pulsed a faint gold. Using a slim penlight, he traced the blue veins until he found a tiny raised bump near her elbow. He pressed gently, sharp line of pain crossed. The widow's face, even in sleep. That told him enough. "There's something inside," he murmured, voice low like distant thunder. A device no bigger than a seed. Ilna's fingers twitched. "Can you take it out?" "Yes," he said. "But I need tools. I don't carry on the road." "We have to visit town." Ilna bit her lip. Going into Dustwell meant walking past neighbors who liked to whisper about her family's troubles. Still, the thought of saving? Her ma pushed fear aside. She nodded once. The cowboy packed supplies into a faded canvas satchel, extra med patches, a small scanner, and 2 vials of clear liquid. Before they left, he placed a second patch on the widow's neck. Glow eased her restless pulse. The cowboy paused by the door, adjusting the rifle on his shoulder. "Lock the house behind us," he told Elna. "And keep your head high." Elna did as he said. Together they walked down the dusty road, a tall shadow and a small one moving. Side by side, heat rose from cracked ground and shimmering waves. The hoverbike stayed behind, hidden in the barn. Riding would draw too much attention. Walking made them look like any other hungry settlers searching for work. As they entered town, wooden storefronts creaked under a dry wind. A lonely bell chimed above the trading post, though no one stepped out to greet them. The air smelled of rust and old engine oil. Folks peeked from behind curtains, whispered, then vanished from view. Ilna's cheeks warmed with shame until she felt the cowboy's steady presence beside her. His calm slowed her racing heart. Their first stop was Jasper's machine shed. Jasper, a broad-shouldered mechanic with thick goggles, sat at a cluttered bench turning a broken turbine blade in his hands. He looked up as the door opened. "I'm closed," he grumbled. "Not for this," the cowboy replied. Jasper's eyes narrowed. He recognized the cowboy, or perhaps the look of someone who wouldn't take a quick no. Jasper jerked his head toward the back room. Inside, metal shelves held rows of power tools, spare parts, and surgical microcutters used to mend. Farming drones. The cowboy pointed to a fine laser scalpel no longer than a finger and a palm-size energy clamp. "I'll borrow these," he said. "That gear ain't cheap," Jasper warned. The cowboy pulled a small silver coin from his coat. One side bore the eagle of old Earth. The other side held starry etchings from a distant colony. Jasper's breath caught. His coins were rare now, worth more than most folk earned in a season. Jasper swallowed hard and nodded. "Take what you need, friend." Ilna watched this silent trade, amazed. As they left, Jasper leaned forward and whispered to her, "Your ma's lucky to have a rider like him." Outside, the sheriff waited. In the street, hands resting on a polished belt buckle that flashed in the light. His smile looked friendly, yet his eyes were cold. "Welcome to Dustwell," he said, voice smooth as oiled gears. "Folks say you're looking for medical tools." "Just helping a sick woman," the cowboy answered. The sheriff's gaze flicked to Elna, then back to the cowboy. "Be careful. Sometimes digging for answers kicks up more than dust." Without further talk, the cowboy tipped his hat and led Ilna onward. They reached the quiet office of Doc Stone, the only healer, who still owned real diagnostic screens. Doc Stone was a thin man with silver hair and gentle hands. He slid his glasses up his nose when he saw them step inside. "Trouble finds you, Ryder," he said. "Trouble's name is Poison," the cowboy replied. "Need a clean table and sterile wraps." Doc Stone guided them into a small room lit by a single overhead lamp. Machines hummed softly along the walls. Ilna stood by the door, wringing her hands, while the cowboy laid out tools on a metal tray. He cleaned the laser scalpel and scanned it twice, making sure the beam was sharp and the frequency right. "This will hurt," he said to Ilna, "but it won't take long." "I'm ready," she whispered, though it wasn't her body on the table. They hurried back to the house, just as twilight painted the horizon violet and gold. Inside, the widow stirred, her breath shallow again. The med patch had dimmed, its medicine running low. The cowboy washed his hands in clear water, slipped on fresh gloves, and placed the surgical lamp above the widow's arm. "Hold her hand," he told Elna. Ilna squeezed her mother's fingers, willing calm into them. The cowboy activated the laser scalpel. Thin beam of light sliced open skin with hardly a trace of blood. The smell of warm copper drifted in the air. He worked quickly, eyes narrowing in concentration. After a tense minute, the tip of a tiny metal shard appeared. He used the energy clamp to lift it free. The implant was no bigger than a grain of rice, but smooth sides bore a mark. 3 stacked triangles. the logo of Brant Forge Industries, a company that once mined the surrounding canyons. Rumors said the corporation pulled out after a scandal, leaving workers unpaid and records sealed away. The cowboy set the implant in a glass vial, sealed it, and injected a pale green solution into the widow's vein. At once the blue glow under her skin faded. She let out a long sigh and slipped into deeper rest. Ilna felt tears rise, half relief, half fear. The cowboy cleaned the wound, placed a new med patch, and stepped back. "The poison won't spread now," he said, "but we need to know why it was placed there." He crossed to the window just as a distant rumble echoed through the night. Red lights flashed low across the fields, stew drones sweeping back, joined by a bigger craft hovering like a dark hawk.
Ow.
A spotlight sliced across the barn, searching. "They're coming," Ilna whispered. The cowboy grabbed his rifle and loaded. A fresh cell. They want the implant or silence. Maybe both. He hurried outside, Ilna close behind. Wind whipped sand around their boots, using an old spanner. The cowboy loosened the support beam under the porch and pulled out a hidden crate of weathered iron plates. He quickly bolted one plate to the porch railing, a makeshift shield. Then he ran to the barn, dropped a metal shutter over the doorway, and locked it. The drones drew nearer, their engines buzzing like angry insects. One drone fired a warning shot, a crackling beam that scorched a line in the dry soil. The cowboy knelt behind the shield, rifle steady. He waited until the first drone's red eye glowed bright, and he fired once. The beam punched a hole straight through the drone's core. Sparks showered, and the machine crashed among dead stalks. The second drone swung wide, firing bolts that burst against the shield. Splinters flew. The widow's house shook. Ilna ducked low, holding her ears. The cowboy tracked the drone's path, breathing slow. When it banked to aim again, he squeezed the trigger. The shot found its mark, and the drone spiraled out of the sky, plowing a jagged trench in the field. Silence settled, broken only by the howl of wind through cracked boards. Ilna lifted her head. The cowboy lowered his rifle, eyes still scanning the darkness. "Those were scouts," he said. "More will come. Bigger ones." Ilna swallowed. "Hard," the sheriff. "Maybe," the cowboy answered, "or the company behind him." They returned inside, where soft lamplight wrapped the room in gentle glow. The widow slept peacefully now, her skin free of the eerie blue shine. Ilna brushed a strand of hair from her mother's face and smiled for the first time in weeks. The cowboy placed the vial containing the implant on the table. Its tiny form gleamed in the light like a cold tear. Covered it with a cloth, then turned to Ilna. "We have proof," he said. "But proof is no good if we're gone by dawn. Tonight, we fortify. Tomorrow, we find allies." Ilna nodded. Fatigue tugged at her, yet determination glowed brighter. Outside, the hoarse wind rattled. Shutters. But inside, the little house felt stronger than steel. As the cowboy set extra rounds beside his rifle and checked door locks, Ilna whispered a quiet promise to the sleeping widow. "We'll keep you safe, Ma," she said, "and we'll bring the truth to light." Above them, the old clock ticked on, marking the seconds between fear and courage. Somewhere beyond the dark hills, unseen forces gathered. Within these four walls, Hope stood watch with a battered hat and a steady aim. Dawn came slow to Sandridge, bringing a pale orange light that crept across the cracked fields and the broken porch. Inside the widow's house, the old clock struck 6, its tired chime echoing in the small front room. The cowboy had not slept. He sat by the window, hat pulled low, rifle resting across his knees. Every few minutes he listened for engines or heavy boots, but only the wind answered him. Ilna woke to the faint smell of fresh coffee and found him there, steady as a carved statue. Her ma still slept, color returning to her cheeks with every soft breath. The med patch on her arm glowed warm gold instead of sickly blue. Ilna brushed a kiss on her mother's forehead, then joined the cowboy by the window. Outside, long shadows stretched across the dry yard. A pair of desert birds pecked at cracked seed pods, unaware of last night's danger. "We need help," the cowboy said at last, his voice rough from silence. "Two of us can't stand against a whole company," Ilna nodded. town hates. Brant Forge. They just need someone brave enough to speak first. Then today we speak, he answered, rising to his full height. They packed supplies, water skins, dried beans, the glass vial holding the tiny implant, and the battered scanner that had exposed its signal. The cowboy made sure the widow was comfortable, then locked the front door. He hid the house key under the second porch plank, showed Elna, and said that secrets were safer when shared. Together they walked down the dusty road toward town, passing fields where nothing grew and wells that pumped only air. The morning heat built quick. Sweat ran down Elna's back, but she kept pace. She noticed fresh tracks in the dirt-wide tire marks, too even for farm wagons. Someone heavy had rolled through during the night. The cowboy crouched and touched one print with 2 fingers. The edges were crisp, meaning the vehicle passed after sunrise. They know we're alive, he muttered, and they're all ready. Moving. In Duswell's Main Street, people gathered in small knots, talking quiet. Jasper the mechanic waved them over to the shade of his workshop awning. He wiped grease from his hands and leaned close. You stirred a hornet's nest, he whispered. Sheriff's men dragged those drone wrecks to the depot before first light and wouldn't answer questions. Now they're spreading a tale that you attacked company property without cause. The cowboy showed Jasper the vial. Company property attacked us first, he said, and planted this in a dying woman. Jasper's face went pale, straightened, stepped inside, and motioned them to follow. In the back room, he brought out an old holoprojector and set the vial on its reading pad. The device whirred to life, casting a floating image of the implant. Serial numbers and a small logo spun slowly in blue light. Jasper read the code aloud, then whistled low. This model links to Brant Forge's closed medical catalog, he said. They banned it years ago after a lawsuit, but I guess someone kept a stash. Ilna stared at the tiny hologram. They used it to poison Ma. Why? Same reason they poisoned the wells, Jasper answered grimly. Get folks sick, scare them off by the land cheap, then reopen the crystal mine with no witnesses. The cowboy's jaw tightened. Land is only worth credits if it stays silent, he said. He pocketed the vial and turned to Ilna. Time to make noise. They left the workshop and headed for Doc Stone's office, the way weary farmers drifted behind them, curious. Rumors traveled faster than drones, and by the time they reached the clinic, a dozen townsfolk had gathered. Doc Stone met them on the porch, wiping sweat from his brow. You bring proof? He asked. The cowboy held up the vial. Doc Stone ushered everyone inside a wide waiting room that smelled of rubbing alcohol and dust. He placed the implant beneath his highest-grade scope and invited the crowd to watch the monitor. Bright images filled the wall screen, making every scratch on the metal seed unmistakable. The doctor pointed to the code, then enlarged a line of text that read, Biochemical Dispersal Unit Experimental. Gasps rippled across the room. This device releases a slow neurotoxin, Doc Stone explained in plain words. Mimics natural fever, but shuts organs over weeks. No poor farmer could afford such tech. Someone planted it on purpose. Anger sparked in the crowd, quiet anger, but deep. A farmer named Claire crossed her arms and spoke first. My boy got sick last month, she said, voice trembling. The same blue veins. He died before the doc could help. Jasper nodded. My cousin, too. Soon others shared stories, strange illnesses. Crops dying overnight, livestock collapsing. With glowing veins, clinic walls seemed to pulse with grief. Ilna felt tears in her eyes but wiped them away. Grief could wait, justice could not. Outside, boots thudded on wooden steps. The sheriff entered, flanked by 2 deputies in polished armor plates. His easy smile had cracks now, like dry paint on old siding. Town meeting without my say? He asked lightly. Mighty rude. The cowboy stepped forward, rifle slung but ready. We have evidence. The sheriff eyed the screen, then shrugged. Pretty lights don't prove a thing. Maybe you forged that image to hide your own crimes. He pointed at the cowboy. An outsider brings trouble. The cowboy's calm voice cut through the room. Then arrest me, but test the implant. First, Doc Stone can run a toxin scan in 5 minutes. If I faked it, you win. If not, You answer to the town. The sheriff hesitated, glance flicking to the growing crowd outside the door. More townsfolk arrived every minute. Numbers shifted the wind. At last he forced a laugh. Fine, run your test. I'll wait. Doc Stone powered a side machine that hummed as it pulled data from the implant. A timer blinked down for minutes. 3, 2. Silence pressed on every chest. When it hit 0, the results flashed. Toxin confirmed. Source: synthetic compound BF09. BF4 Brant Forge. Jasper whispered. The room erupted in shouts. The sheriff backed toward the door, hand drifting to his sidearm. Deputies moved too, but the cowboy was faster, lifting his rifle to block the exit. We finished talking, he said. Fear glinted in the sheriff's eyes, but he straightened. You think a mob will fix your troubles? The company's dropship lands tonight with a full squad of enforcers. You can't stop them. Maybe not, the cowboy replied, but we can make sure they land on empty deeds. He told the crowd his plan. Move every family to the abandoned stone quarry at sunset, out of the enforcer's path, while the cowboy and a few volunteers held the main street. Doc Stone would broadcast the test results to off-world regulators. Once the message left the planet, Brant Forge would face heavy fines on richer worlds. Even corporate soldiers would hesitate to spill innocent blood under that light. The people listened, anger melting into purpose. Claire offered her truck to carry the sick. Jasper pledged explosives he kept for breaking rocks. Miners spoke of hidden tunnels that could flank the landing pad. Hope grew roots. The sheriff shook. His head, fools. All of you. When the dropship comes, you'll wish you bowed quietly. The cowboy lowered his rifle slightly and answered, Quiet is how you kill children. The sheriff tried to push past, but 3 farmers blocked. He glared and spat dust, then stormed out, deputies on his heels. The crowd parted, watching him go. The cowboy turned to Elna. Time to fetch supplies, he said. They hurried back home. The sky blazed copper as late afternoon settled. In the yard, the cowboy handed Ilna a small handheld radio with 1 red button. Press if you need me, he told her. She clipped it to her belt. Together, they packed blankets, food, and a spare power cell for the rifle. The widow awoke enough to whisper thanks. Her voice was stronger than yesterday. Sunlight dipped lower. Wagons creaked down the road, children clutching toys, while parents guided tired animals. Doc Stone's old generator hummed to life, ready to beam truth into the void. Thunder rumbled in the far west jet thrusters, not weather. The dropship approached. Ilna looked to the cowboy. His eyes reflected both the coming night and a steady promise. Whatever storm Brant Forge brought, he would meet it in the street. Hat brim low, words few. Heart fierce not just for a widow, but for a town that chose to stand tall. The sky over Dustwell burned red and gold as the last light of sunset touched the rooftops. Families hurried toward the old stone quarry, wagons creaking under the weight of blankets, water barrels, and frightened animals. Miners with lanterns guided them along narrow paths. The widow, still weak but awake, rode in Claire's truck, wrapped in quilts that smelled of lavender and sun-dried cotton. Ilna sat beside her mother, holding her hand and whispering comforting words. The quarries. Tall walls would hide them when the dropship came. Back in town, the cowboy and 6 volunteers prepared to face what was coming. Jasper carried 2 crates of small rock charges. A miner named Leo hefted a heavy pulse cannon he once used to carve crystal veins. Claire's older brother Sam strapped on a welding mask and clutched a long iron pry bar. Doc Stone remained in his clinic, fingers flying over the transmitter controls, ready to beam proof of Brant Forge's crimes across. Every relay he could reach, the main street of Dustwell felt like a silent stage waiting for its final scene. Shadows stretched from broken porch posts. Tumbleweeds rolled across cracked boards. Above, the first stars pricked holes in a darkening sky. The cowboy stood in the center of the road, long coat flapping in the cooling wind. He checked his rifles. Power cell one last time, then nodded to Jasper. You light the charges when I give the word, he said. Jasper wiped sweat from his brow and answered, "Count on it." Leo and Sam hid behind a low stone wall near the depot. They would aim. The pulse cannon at the dropship's landing struts, once it touched down. Two other volunteers, Lena and Greg, climbed the water tower with scoped rifles scavenged from abandoned hunting cabins. Their job was to watch the sheriff's men and call out any sign of betrayal. A distant roar rolled through the air. Engines. Bright lights appeared on the western horizon, growing larger and louder. The dropship arrived like a falling star, flames from its thrusters painting the desert floor in harsh orange light. Dustwell's roofs rattled as the craft hovered, searching for a place to land. Finally it settled on the flat field beyond the depot, kicking up a cyclone of sand. The sheriff's shiny patrol vehicle parked nearby, headlights sweeping the street. The dropship's side ramp hissed open. Out marched 10 enforcers, wearing black armor trimmed with green, the Brant Forge logo shining on their shoulders. Carried a heavy stun carbine and a baton able to crack bone with a single hit. Between them walked a tall woman in a crisp gray coat. Her silver hair was pulled into a tight knot, and a data pad glowed in her hand. She looked at the boarded-up buildings with cool indifference. The sheriff hurried to her, hat in hand. "Director." "Vale," he said, voice eager. "The town is quiet, just like I promised. The troublemaker is straight ahead." Director Vale did not smile. She merely gestured toward the cowboy. "Take him and any evidence he carries," she ordered the enforcers. "Burn the clinic records. The settlement signs over its land tonight." The sheriff opened his mouth to object he had hoped for a tidy reward, but one look from Vale silenced him. Fear flickered in his eyes. He pointed a shaky finger toward the cowboy. "There," he croaked. The cowboy's voice drifted across. "The street, calm and even. This town already owns its land. You only bought lies." Vale signaled. 4 enforcers advanced, weapons ready. Jasper touched the wire detonator, waiting. The cowboy stepped forward. In the hushed dark, every boot scrape sounded like thunder. 2 armored figures neared the stone wall where Leo and Sam crouched. Leo whispered steady and powered up the pulse cannon, its low hum a caged beast. As soon as the lead enforcer past an iron post marked with a chalk X, the cowboy shouted, "Now!" Jasper pressed the trigger. Hidden charges erupted under the dusty field. Sharp cracks split the night, followed by a shower of dirt and sparks. The front line of enforcers staggered, momentarily blinded. Smoke billowed, masking the cowboy's next move. He dropped to one knee and fired twice, striking the stun carbines in their power modules. The weapons fizzled and died. Director Vale snarled and barked orders. The remaining enforcers pushed through the smoke, but Leo swung the pulse cannon. Around, a blue beam slammed into the dropship's front landing strut, warping metal in a burst of white heat. The craft lurched to one side, engines whining. Vale's datapad blinked red alarms. From the water tower, Lena called out, "Deputies on the left." Greg fired a warning shot across the ground, forcing the sheriff's men to dive for cover. Behind stacked barrels, the sheriff himself scrambled into his patrol vehicle, engine revving. He tried to speed toward the clinic, perhaps to destroy the transmitter. But Elna's dog, loose from the quarry, darted into his path. The sheriff swerved, lost control, and slammed into a water trough. Muddy water burst over the hood, sputtering. The engine. Doc Stone's voice crackled over the town loudspeaker. "Broadcast engaged. Data sent to Colonial Health Council and Galactic Law Office. Brant Forge toxic implant confirmed." Every corner of Dustwell heard it. Vale's face drained of color. The cowboy walked through thinning smoke, rifle lowered. "But eyes sharp. Call off your men," he told Vale. Lifted her chin. "No," she said, pressing a hidden switch on her coat. An alarm wailed from the dropship. A self-destruct sequence began to flash on its hull, numbers counting down from 60. She intended to erase all proof, even if it meant burning the town. The cowboy turned, shouting, "Pull back." Volunteers scattered. Jasper and Sam dragged stunned enforcers away from the ship. Lena and Greg climbed down in a hurry. Vale tried to retreat toward the ramp, but a cracked strut gave way, throwing her to the ground. The cowboy reached her first. He grabbed her radio, switched it off, and tossed it aside. The countdown read 40 seconds. He glared at Vale. "Cancel it," she spat dust. "I'd rather choke on flames." He held her gaze for 2 breaths, then yanked a cord from her coat pocket. Tiny sparks flew. The countdown froze at 38. Vale gasped, shocked, he knew. The override code? The cowboy bound her wrists with her own belt. Jasper sprinted up, panting. "Got your message," he said, hefting a last charge. "Want me to finish the strut? Send the ship flat?" The cowboy shook his head. "Let it stand. Regulators will need the wreck for evidence." He pointed to 2 conscious enforcers, trembling. "Near the ramp, take them and the sheriff to Dockstone. They'll testify or rot." The night wind finally swept the smoke away, revealing a battered main street dotted with blackened craters, but still standing. Townsfolk emerged from hiding, staring wide-eyed at the ruined dropship and dazed soldiers. Children clutched each other, unsure if the danger was truly gone. Ilna arrived on a small buggy driven by miner Cody. She jumped off and ran straight. To the cowboy, "Ma is safe," she said, breathless. "She wanted me to thank you." The cowboy's stern face softened. "This ain't finished yet," he said, but a hint of relief warmed his eyes. Dockstone walked toward them, holding a printed receipt from the transmitter. "Confirmation," he declared. "Central Law Office accepted our file. Brant Forge assets frozen pending investigation." Cheers rose from the townspeople, soft at first, then louder until they echoed off broken walls. Director Vale glared. But her power was gone. Regulators would land within days, not with weapons, but with warrants, the kind that strip fortunes faster than any gun. The cowboy turned to the crowd. "Help each other," he said simply. "Hold this proof safe. Repair your wells. Plant again." He looked to Ilna. "Your ma will need medicine still, yet the town must build a clinic stronger than walls." People nodded, hope glowing like dawn behind their eyes. Jasper clapped the cowboy's shoulder. "Stay for the rebuilding." The cowboy tipped his hat. "I'll stay till morning," he replied, "long enough to see those bright suns rise. On land that's free, stars glittered overhead, calm at last." Dustwell's long night was ending, and with it the rule of fear. In the quiet that followed, the cowboy walked the length of the ruined street once more, checking every corner, making sure no hidden flames still threatened the town he had come to guard. And though engines might someday roar again, the people knew now how to stand tall together under twin suns, guided by the memory of a silent rider who met darkness with steady hands and simple, unbroken words. The first glow of dawn crept over Dustwell, turning the battered dropship into a dark mound of cooling metal. Broken armor plates lay scattered across the main street like shed scales from a long-dead beast. But the air felt lighter than any morning Elna could remember. No engines roared overhead, and no hidden drones buzzed through the fields. Instead, there was birdsong, soft and uncertain, as if even the desert creatures waited to see if hope would. Last, inside Dockstone's clinic, Ilna's ma rested on a sturdy cot that volunteers had carried in during the night. Fresh linen hung at the windows, letting gentle light wash across her face. Her color no longer shifted between sickly blue and pale white. It held a steady pink now, warm and alive. Ilna squeezed her mother's hand and felt a calm pulse under skin that had been icy only 2 days before. The poison was gone the first. Miracle. The cowboy stepped into the room, hat in hand. His coat was dusty, and a new tear crossed one sleeve, but his eyes were clear. He watched Ilna's ma breathe for a long moment, then nodded, as if checking a final task from a long list. He turned to leave, but Ilna caught his coat. "Stay," she whispered. "She'll want to thank you when she wakes." The cowboy glanced toward the sunrise outside. "I'll stay a while," he said in his rough, quiet way, "but work begins soon." They found that work waiting on the street. Jasper and the miners dragged spare metal sheets to patch holes in rooftops. Claire's brother Sam led a group pushing the sheriff's ruined patrol vehicle out of the trough. Children collected broken drone parts, laughing every time a blue spark popped from a loose wire. Lena and Greg, the water tower lookouts, carried a large crate of stored seeds, barley beans, hardy cactus fruit seeds that had been hidden for years because no one dared plant until water was sure. Now they planned to start new rows that afternoon. The cowboy knelt by the crate, checked the dryness of each packet, and smiled when he found none spoiled. Plant deep, he advised, and water at sundown so the heat doesn't steal the first drink. Meanwhile, Doc Stone connected his generator to the wrecked dropship's intact solar panels. The boost would power an upgraded transmitter, ensuring their broadcast sat within every regulator inbox by midday. 3 enforcers, stripped of weapons and armor, stood under guard, but helped rewire the system. Guilt heavy on their shoulders, they followed orders without complaint. The sheriff, bruised and silent, sat behind steel bars in the clinic storage room. Director Vale sat opposite him, wrists bound, eyes cold. Outside their window, townsfolk. Stacked boxes in front of the door, medicine, blankets, fresh bread supplies, earmarked for those who would travel with the regulators to face trial. Dustwell showed mercy even to enemies. The cowboy joined Jasper by the dropship. Together they studied the warped landing strut and cracked hull. Regulators want proof, Jasper said. We should mark every bolt so nobody can argue it wasn't. Brant, forge metal. The cowboy nodded. Take photographs. Burn the logo into a plank. Keep that in the mayor's office. He paused, then added, and build a fence so curious kids don't climb over old fuel cells. Jasper laughed. A proper fence? That'll be new? Eddie sent Leo to find posts and wire. Progress moved on steady feet. Around. Mid-morning, Ilna walked from the clinic carrying 2 cups of spiced tea, the last of her family's hidden herbs. She handed one to the cowboy, who accepted with a grateful dip of his head. They stood together beneath a silent hoverbike, parked near the barn's half-repaired wall. The bike's steel mane glittered in daylight. Ma used to tell stories about riders who saved towns, Ilna said softly. I never believed them until now. The cowboy stared into his cup. Truth and legend ain't far apart, he answered. Someone sees kindness once, and every retelling makes it brighter. She smiled at that. Then I'll retell this day bright as I can. He raised his cup in salute, and for the first time, Elna heard a quiet chuckle rumble in his chest. They had only just finished the tea when a deeper rumble rolled across the plain. Townsfolk froze, half-built fences abandoned mid-swing. Lena squinted toward the eastern sky and saw a small craft cutting through clouds, bearing a silver stripe rather than Brant forge green. She cupped her hands and called down, Regulator. Shuttle incoming. Relief rushed across faces, but the cowboy lifted a hand. Still stay alert, he warned. Wolves sometimes wear new coats. The shuttle landed on the same field where smoke still clung to blackened grass. 4 uniformed. Officers stepped out, badges of the Galactic Law Office shining bright. Their ship bore a live camera feed transmitting to Orbita, sign of official eyes on every move. One officer, Captain Ramirez, approached the waiting crowd. He was tall, with kind eyes set above a stern jaw. He greeted Jasper first, then accepted. The datapad from Doc Stone. While other officers inspected the dropship, Captain Ramirez listened to summaries of last night's events. He scanned the implant under a portable scope, compared serial numbers, and whistled low. Brant Forge will pay dearly. His voice carried no doubt. This implant violates every health code in the charter. He ordered his team to take Director Vale, the sheriff, and the willing enforcers into custody. Vale tried to argue, but the presence of the town, standing shoulder to shoulder, quieted her words. Ramirez read them their rights in a clear voice. When they were led aboard the shuttle, many Dustwell citizens exhaled for some, the first easy breath in years. Ramirez turned to the cowboy next. You filed the primary report? He asked. The cowboy shook his head. The town did. I just helped them find their voice. Ramirez nodded, respecting modesty. Still, protocol offers a bounty to anyone who exposes corporate harm. He reached into a pouch and produced 3 gold-edged credit chits. Each chit could buy a new roof or 10 crates of seed. He handed them to the cowboy. Without waiting, The cowboy passed the chits to Elna. "For the clinic fund," he said. Ilna opened her mouth to argue, but one look at his steady eyes stopped her. She clutched the chits, tears shining. Work resumed, quicker now. Regulators measured chemical spills, took photos of wells, and interviewed families about illnesses. Captain Ramirez promised water filters and fresh seed from Central Relief. Also granted temporary authority to Doc Stone to run a proper field hospital until replacements arrived. Late afternoon found the cowboy repairing his hoverbike's cracked exhaust fin. Elna brought him a small cloth bundle bread with honey and a slice of salted ham, saved from townsfolk donations. "You haven't eaten since dawn," she scolded gently. He accepted the food and ate slow. When he finished, he checked the bike's power cells. "I'll ride tonight," he told her, voice careful. "The town's future belongs to its own now. Where will you go?" she asked, though she guessed the answer. "Wherever another road needs riding," he said. He mounted the hoverbike. The metal horse shook dust from its flanks as the engine hummed awake. Jasper, Doc Stone, and half the town gathered to see him off. Ilna's ma, still weak, stepped onto the porch with Claire's help. The widow's voice was soft, but sure when. She called, "Thank you, Ryder." The cowboy tipped his hat, and for the briefest moment, Elna saw him smile. Lines around his eyes easing like sun-touched snow. The hoverbike lifted on glowing thrusters, hovering above the ground. The cowboy looked over the rooftops one last time, the mended fences, the children planting seeds, the proud faces shining in evening light. Then he turned the bike west toward the open desert. Dust lifted in a golden arc behind him, catching the sun like sparks from a forge. Elna watched until the shape grew small, a single rider heading into endless horizon. She pressed the radio button at her belt once. A faint click answered hearing. Her farewell. She whispered into the wide sky, "Safe travels, cowboy." The radio stayed silent, but she felt sure he heard as twilight deepened. Dustwell's new well pump creaked to life, drawing clean water for the first time in seasons. Lanterns flickered on porches, not out of fear, but as gentle beacons, telling every traveler that kindness could still be found under twin suns, and in the distance, where heat met stars, the cowboy's silhouette merged with the rolling dunes. One more legend riding forward, carrying justice like a quiet flame that no wind could ever snuff out. The hot season passed slowly, and Dustwell changed day by day, the way a seed changes under quiet soil. Although the cowboy had vanished into the horizon weeks before, the memory of his steady voice seemed to linger in every corner of the town. Whenever the twin suns rose, people woke early, not with gloom, but with purpose. Because his parting words, "Help each other," still rang clear at dawn each morning. Claire and her brother Sam walked the neat rows of new crops. Green shoots poked through sand where nothing had grown for years. The water pump, repaired with spare parts from the wrecked dropship, clanked in a steady rhythm that sounded almost like music. Children carried tin pails back and forth, watering every hill of beans with laughter instead of complaints. The desert birds soon learned to follow them, snapping up insects stirred by small feet. Doc Stone expanded the clinic into 2 extra rooms. Regulators had sent crates of medicine, coated with pale blue labels instead of the threatening green that used to mark Brant Forge goods. The sick came from distant homesteads, and no one was turned away. Ilna's ma, still weak but recovering, sat at the new reception desk, logging names in her neat handwriting and offering encouraging words to every patient. She wore a white scarf on her head to block the sun, and when her blue eyes lifted to each arrival, hope shone brighter than any medicine bottle. Jasper ran wires from the dropship solar panels to every house on Main Street. At night. Small. Lamps glowed in windows where darkness once huddled. The panels also powered a crude radio tower. Every evening, Jasper broadcast town news crop reports, lost and found items, birthday wish is across the empty plains. Sometimes he added a story about the rider who had saved them, describing the cold standoff or the dusty smile no one saw, but all believed. These stories traveled farther than anyone guessed. Traders arriving with fresh tools claimed they had heard about Dustwell from hundreds of miles away. One calm afternoon, Captain Ramirez returned in a larger shuttle, bringing official deeds signed and sealed. He assembled the townsfolk beside the repaired well and read aloud, by order of the Galactic Law Office. The lands surrounding Dustwell are hereby confirmed as community-owned territory. No corporate claims shall supersede this charter. Cheers erupted, echoed by happy barks from Ilna's dog chasing its tail in excitement. The captain also delivered a legal notice showing that Brant Forge had withdrawn from the entire region and paid a vast fine, part of which would fund irrigation lines and a proper schoolhouse. He tipped his hat to Ilna's ma, shook Jasper's oily hand without hesitation, and flew off again. But not before promising to visit once a year. It's just for the pleasure of friendly company. Though life grew easier, the town did not forget vigilance. Lena and Greg kept the water tower lookout, but now they watched for wandering merchants or lost travelers seeking a drink. Yet, they welcomed strangers, yet asked honest questions, learning from the past that kind hearts could stay kind and still. Keep sharp eyes. One evening, as orange twilight faded, Ilna sat on the porch steps with her ma, sipping cool mint tea. Cicadas whirred in distant cactus groves. The house, once a place of fear, now smelled of fresh paint and pine soap. Ilna's ma squeezed her daughter's hand. "You kept me alive," she whispered. Ilna shook her head. "We all did." The cowboy. Most of all, her mother gazed west, where the desert swallowed the sun each night. "Think he'll ever come back?" Ilna unclipped the small radio beacon from her belt, the same one the cowboy had given her. She pressed the call button once. Only static crackled, which was no surprise. She had pressed it every night since he left, sending a silent greeting into the dark. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe he'll visit towns that need him more." The widow nodded. "Then we must honor what he taught us, stand for others, the way he stood for us." By midsummer, Dustwell's first harvest ripened bright beans, hearty grain, and rows of cactus fruit with sweet pulp. A festival filled the main street. Long tables held stews, breads, and spicy sauces. Folks strung lanterns across rooftops, and a battered guitar rang under the twin moons. Claire danced barefoot, laughing, while Doc Stone tapped his foot, surprising. Everyone with gentle rhythm, even Jasper, usually shy, led a line dance, wiping grease from his face and grinning wide. During the festival's last song, Ilna stepped away from the crowd, drawn by a distant hum. She walked past quiet stores already dark and followed the sound beyond the barn. There, silver, under moonlight, stood the cowboy's hoverbike, its steel mane shimmering. The rider himself leaned against the frame, arms folded, hat brim shadowing. His eyes, yet she felt his smile. "Knew you'd call me," he said softly. Tears sprang to her eyes. "We pressed the button every night." "Heard half those calls," he answered. "Was close enough." He surveyed the fields, the lantern glow, the laughter drifting over roofs. "This looks like Dustwell ain't dust anymore. We have water, crops, and a charter because of you." He shook his head. "Because you believed each other." Reached into his coat and pulled out a small package tied with string. "Brought you a gift from the northern ridges." Inside the wrapping sat a seed as blue as dusk, no bigger than a pebble. "Plant at first rain," he instructed. "Grows deep roots, pulls water from stone. Feed a village with one tree." Ilna held the seed close to her heart. "Stay for the planting." The cowboy looked toward the open horizon. "Wish I could," he said, voice low and kind. Another. Town sent a call. Different trouble, same greed. He swung a leg over the hoverbike. Engines warmed, humming like gentle thunder. Before lifting, he fixed his steady gaze on her. "Promise me you'll keep riding the straight road," he said. "We will," she whispered. He nodded once, then offered a rare full smile, soft, almost shy, yet bright as sunrise. "Goodbye." "Ilna." "Goodbye, Dustwell." The hoverbike lifted, dust swirling under thrusters, and shot toward the starry west. Lantern light traced the fading streak until it blended with night. Ilna wiped tears. But they were not sad, tears just proof that something precious had passed through her life and left it better. She returned to the festival, clutching the blue seed. Her ma saw it and understood without words. Together. stepped to the edge of the dance ring where a small circle of open soil waited. Lena bent, placed the seed in the ground, and pressed earth over it. She patted the spot twice, like sealing a promise. Then she arose, joined hands with her mother, and swayed to the slow, joyful song rising under twin moons. Weeks rolled onward. When the first autumn rain came, rare and gentle fresh green shot up where Ilna had planted the blue seed. The little plant grew faster than any crop, sending roots deep, leaves wide. By the next season, it stood taller than the water tower, its branches heavy with glowing fruit that tasted of cool rain and wild honey. Travelers soon spoke of Dustwell's miracle tree, and many arrived to learn to trade, or just to rest beneath its broad shade. At sunset each day the townsfolk gathered under that tree to share bread and tell stories. Ilna often spoke of the cowboy, how he rode a metal horse, how he fought with silence, how he believed one small town could face the greed of a whole galaxy. I listened, eyes shining, because every soul who heard felt braver afterward, and if a stranger passing through needed help, Dustwell never turned them away. Some evenings, a distant hum echoed beyond the dunes, never loud, always gentle, like a greeting carried on warm wind. Children would point west and whisper, "There goes the rider." No one knew if it was truly him or only desert spirits, echoing old engines. Yet those sounds kept courage alive, for courage had settled in dust, well the way morning light settles on strong stone, quiet, sure, and lasting. The town that once stood on fear now stood on fellowship, wells running deep, crops standing tall, and hearts open to the next traveler who might need a place to heal. And somewhere in the endless west, the cowboy carried their story beneath his hat, guiding him toward the next lonely road where a whisper of help waited to be heard.